I'm Christy.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is The Psychic
And the Skeptic. Welcome back to The Psychic and the Skeptic. And on this, our 36th episode, we are going to start our Cryptid Files.
Yay!
We've had a request for this type of episode, and we've covered cryptid previously when we did the episode, I believe it was part 5 of our paranormal series, and we covered skinwalkers, which is technically a cryptid, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot more to talk about, weird creatures, and my favorite one, I think, that we haven't even done it yet, but I already know it's going to be my favorite, will be when we cover the Yeti or Bigfoot. That to me is the most famous cryptid, but we're going to start a little small. And on this episode, we're covering one of the most unsettling type of phenomenon in human history, just because it is so personal and invasive. And this is the doppelganger.
Woohoo!
So this is not a lookalike. It's not your twin, but a double of you, a living person that appears without explanation.
And we have had cases like that happen on investigations, and we'll get more into that in just a little bit.
So the other fascinating point about this topic is that reports of doppelgangers span centuries, all cultures, royalty, poets, soldiers even. And we're going to dive into some of the stories and the cases from some famous people who have experienced this phenomenon. So the big question is, are these spiritual doubles, or is it something happening within the brain? Before we dive deeper into doppelgangers, let's just talk about cryptids in general, because as the skeptic, this is obviously folklore and legend, which is super fun. I love this as a topic, but you know me, I'm going to be completely shut off on any of this being anything real or anything to take seriously. Certainly entertaining, very creative of us as human beings, I do say.
But I have to disagree with you in a sense, because honestly, in all my years of paranormal investigating, I have had a couple of experiences. So whether it's brain related, according to our skeptic here, folks, or if there's something more to it, I am definitely on the side that doppelgangers are real and do happen.
Well, as a medical professional, I am on the side of the brain and how fascinating our brain can take experiences and connect them to our emotions in such a way that it seems really realistic.
Okay, so here's something for you. So yesterday, I was at my house and I was folding some laundry, all right? And as I had my head down and tilted to the right a little bit, but I swore I saw someone walk behind me and into my laundry room, and I could have swore it was my son that had gotten up and came out of his room. And I turned and I looked at my husband and I said, "Hey, is Grayson up?" And he's like, "No, why?" And I told him what happened. So explain that to me. What did I see there, Mrs. Skeptic?
Well, we are paranormal investigators, so if there is some kind of spirit, I think it was a ghost. Or you need an EEG and we need to reevaluate your brain because you're having seizures.
No, I wasn't seizing out.
No, I'm teasing. Well, and again, all this stuff usually happens in your periphery where you're meant to only see shadows. You're not meant to see real clearly in your periphery. So
that's true. And we have had an episode already on shadow figures.
Right. So I would explain that as something was off a little bit in your periphery and your brain wants to take something from memory and to interpret what that confusing vision was. So then in normal circumstances, what would happen in your house on a normal day might be your son walking by. So your brain makes you seem to think that's what it was.
Maybe. So. Or the fact that since I am a psychic, maybe I had someone that was passing through or visiting. You
Probably. That's more likely, just knowing you. But for doppelgangers, this would be if you literally saw a vision of yourself, an image, exact copy. And in some of these cases we're going to talk about today, it could be you in the future or a past version of you. Now, paranormal theory, we have talked about residual energy that imprints on the environment. And that, to me, if you want to find a topic in paranormal theory that has a higher likelihood of being true and scientific, I would say residual energy is something that could be explained as being a true phenomenon.
Yeah, but in the case with the doppelganger, it's usually not a residual, and I'll tell you why. Because you normally would see not an image of yourself. For example, we were investigating the Eskridge Hotel down in Wynnewood, Oklahoma, and one of the investigators that was on my team at the time thought she saw her husband walk right in front of her. And then her husband actually comes behind her and she's, hey, wait a second. I just saw you pass in front of me. So it doesn't necessarily have to be yourself. This can be also the image of someone else that you see.
Well, sure. And that would be considered doppelganger-like activity. But what I'm talking about is seeing an imprint of yourself again. So if there was some trauma in your past that occurred and you had some extreme spike of emotion that then imprinted on the environment, I could see that imprint on the environment as something that somebody might experience and confuse as a doppelganger, especially if there's some resemblance in that person or spirit energy.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. But
Right.
I think the likelihood of you seeing yourself, even imprinted or
Oh,
not,
yeah.
would be very rare.
Exactly.
Now, someone else, maybe.
Right. And that might be what we're seeing as paranormal investigators on a location where there's repetitive activity and the same shadow crosses a hallway at the same time.
Yeah, that's
The
residual.
environmental conditions are right.
Yeah, that's residual.
Right.
Residual energy, residual haunting, for sure.
Right.
But different, I think, when it comes to doppelgangers.
Like you're saying, the rarity of that would be extreme because you'd have to have some kind of resemblance. And with how rare it is to see residual energy or residual apparitions, that's extremely rare. But then to have that image look exactly like you is even more rare.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
You couldn't explain the experience that I referenced to earlier with the paranormal investigator seeing her husband. So that's something that wasn't residually printed there. So, no, to me, that's where the doppelganger, the
Well-
true doppelganger comes in.
So I would say that whatever she saw had the same shape as her husband. And so when your brain sees confusing images, it's going to interpret to something from your memory. So it's going to go there first and create like a pareidolia effect where she thought she saw her husband because that's what it resembled. Her brain went right to something from her memory.
Okay. Also, voices. We know just from being on investigations that spirits can mimic voices. So if they can mimic voices, they can also mimic what someone looks like.
Sure. I believe that as paranormal theory, that if spirits exist, that would be something they could do. I would say that would be something negative in trying to manipulate you and gain trust
It could.
in you. I could see there being an explanation, depending on the situation, to where they're trying to calm you if it's a calming site.
I see both sides of the coin. I think it all would depend upon the spirit's intent.
Right.
Just from working with spirit
Mhm.
for so long now, I think all of that would depend upon the spirit's intent, what message they're trying to get across. Again, goes back to intent.
Right. So when it comes to paranormal theory, everything's a stretch to me as the skeptic, but the type of activity that I could see that science would lean towards being true would probably be that residual type energy. But you tend to have a hard time with residual. I feel like you lean more towards the intelligent type haunting.
No, not necessarily. So my whole thought on that is, yes, I do believe that residual energy is a real thing and it does happen. My question with that is, when something traumatic happens and it imprints upon the environment, how much time actually has to happen before that residual energy will start playing? So are we waiting 6 months, a year, 10
No.
years, 20 years, 100 years?
The theory behind residual energy is the environment has to be the same. And I think that's a stretch too. But like this is when we have clients that have activity that seems to occur about the same time of night. So the lighting is the same, the temperature is the same, or same time of year. It's cold or it's hot. Static electricity in the winter when conditions are dry and the air is charged a little bit more. That gives that energy for that imprint to show itself. It's only because that is something that you can measure a little bit easier, which is why science might support that, if anything, in paranormal. But I think in the connection with doppelgangers is that, again, this stretches it even further, is that your brain is going to tap from memory and try to make sense of what you're seeing, like a pareidolia effect. So if it looks familiar to you, whether it's yourself or somebody you know, I could see that connection there in explaining what a doppelganger would be.
Yeah, I will tell you, there will never be 100% of the same exact conditions ever to reproduce anything. I don't
kind of
care.
agree with you on that one. Yeah.
How scientific that you are, there will never be. So there's got to be more to it than that in with it. And yes, we know that residual from our 20-some plus years of investigating, we know that residual and intelligent hauntings are two different things and they both occur. Now, do I believe that there's more intelligent out there than residual? Yes, because I think it takes a lot of imprinting from trauma to do that. Yes, our brain is going to make sense out of chaos. However, I feel like a person's brain can truly see what's there. And it doesn't have to be making you think you see someone that you know or whatever.
And you're also making the assumption your brain is healthy. Now, you'll see when we go through some of these cases that there's a lot of emotional stress. There's some sleep deprivation, conditions where the brain is going through some kind of stress. And we can talk about how this could be explained as a non-metaphysical phenomenon.
Oh, sure. Of course. And we know that not everybody out there is, like you said, a healthy brain.
I'm saying their brain is stroke or seizure or sleep deprived.
Yes.
All of those things that can happen to anybody.
Now, I can see that. Yes, I can definitely see the medical reasons. But I also say I think it is a true phenomenon. And I don't think anybody can convince me differently just based off of my own experiences.
So that's interesting because when we talk about our cryptids, usually when it comes to creatures like skinwalkers, we were both pretty much in agreement that that probably does not exist. But this is one cryptid where you are sold on as
absolutely
metaphysical, that it's a true phenomenon, it does exist. There's some overlap with the doppelganger in the time slips too. So as we go through the different cases, you may see some connections to some of the other topics we've discussed.
Absolutely.
So what is our first case?
So our first one is back from the late 1700s. This guy's name is Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I think that's how you say it anyway.
We'll go with that.
So he was a poet, a scientist, a philosopher. Sounds like he's a very smart man. He actually saw himself riding down a road. And this figure looked older and wore clothes that he did not own. And then years later, he found himself riding along this same road, and he was wearing the exact same outfit that he had seen on the figure before. And he believed that he had witnessed a future version of himself and maybe was a time slip. Now, we have talked about time slips before, and a time slip, just as a recap, and if you haven't heard our time slip episode, it's actually a very good one. You can go back and hear that, but it's supposedly an alleged phenomenon where people or a group of people suddenly find that they have a shift in time. So they might move backwards or forward to some point in history. So for this guy, honestly, I don't really consider this a case of a doppelganger. I think he was really getting a premonition of what was to come. So I say
but because
hooey
he
on
saw
this.
himself, this still fits the definition of viewing another version of yourself, like a double. It still looked like him exactly. It had different clothing that he didn't own. And then it was his realization later on that deja vu hit him and said, oh, I've been here before.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, this is the same exact outfit I remember seeing. So I think that connection that years past, that's where some of that overlap and all these different phenomenon comes in. But from a scientific viewpoint, this is the fact that this recollection occurs years later is what matters, because our memory isn't a recording, it's reconstructive. So he's going through his thoughts and the long-term memory, and his brain is reconfiguring to try to bring forth to consciousness what he remembers from that time. So it's recreating a memory. So it's sorting through the different pieces of time and trying to connect it to the emotion he has in that moment. So what he saw in the vision as futuristic clothing recreated the memory for him, which, who knows, he didn't take a snapshot of what was going on, but his memory recall isn't exactly the same. It's very similar to crime scenes where they have eyewitnesses come and describe what they saw. In a brief moment, somebody might recall, oh, this person was wearing a red hoodie, when in fact it was a green t-shirt. And the details can be way off based on how your memory recreates what you saw. That's what probably happened in this case. And his emotional stress at the time could have distorted his perception because of that realization that, oh my gosh, I'm in this moment. So then it turns into hindsight that can stitch meaning into coincidence.
Yeah, I get it. But again, to me, that's a premonition. I feel like it is some sort of entity. Now, whether this is an earthbound, whatever it may be, whether it's some sort of, I don't know, unknown type spirit, but I feel like it is an actual entity that takes on the form of either yourself or someone else for specific reasons, whatever those reasons are, that fit that spirit's intent. That's what I feel like a true doppelganger is. And this is why I believe in doppelgangers. So some of these cases, like with this is premonition, deja vu, that's all that is. Nothing to do with doppelganger.
So in this guy's case, what was the spirit that's giving him the premonition?
This is not a spirit giving him this. I believe we have the abilities to do things and to see things if we know how to open up that part of our brain. And I do believe that every once in a while, when we're not trying, we do get shown things, like our brain has that ability to show us things in the future. And that's where deja vu comes in. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
I've done this before.
Up until seeing the future, I could see where you were coming from. But I have to disagree with you on some of the things about the brain, because there are things we do know that our brain will do, like memory,
Yes.
reconstruction, and that can explain a lot of this for this specific case. So with this guy, initially he had a sort of premonition. He saw himself in the future, and the doppelganger piece comes in only because what he saw was an exact image of himself, yet in different clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then years later, it now becomes a deja vu experience because he had that feeling, I've been here before, and then memory reconstructs what he recalls as being an exact replica of himself now in the clothing that he's wearing today. So it's a whole bunch of phenomena all in one here. But what your beliefs are is that the doppelganger is a being versus the general definition of doppelganger being just strictly another image of yourself, if you want to take the literal definition of it.
Yeah, I think I lean toward a little bit more of that. Yes. Now, I'm not saying that the others are not possible. Okay.
Right.
But I do believe that with most doppelgangers, yes,
Right.
I do believe that it's going to be something spirit related.
So the term itself is like an umbrella term.
The different types based off of their experience, what's going on.
Whether this is some kind of premonition, whether it's
Mhm.
an apparition trying to communicate,
Yes.
or some kind of time slip and you're seeing yourself in the future or in the past.
Correct.
So this next case falls into that seeing yourself into the future.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay. So I think this is another case of precognition, but we're looking at the date of 1603, and Queen Elizabeth I supposedly entered into her bedchambers, appropriate for back then, right? But anyway, she saw her own double lying motionless on her bed, and it was like in her royalty. She was dressed as a queen, but she saw herself being very pale. Her eyes were closed, and she said, quote, "I know what it meaneth. I shall die," unquote. This really bothered her, and she refused to sleep for several nights, but she ended up dying days later. It comes from court records that were written after her death. I think this is another case of premonition, and I do think that we are allowed from the other side to get glimpses of what may happen to us in the future.
What do you think the purpose behind that would be if they want to communicate that to her?
Maybe to prepare. Maybe you've got to say goodbye to loved ones, or maybe you need to get your affairs in order. Things like that.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I do believe that we sometimes are allowed to know that information if we do need to prepare, because that's going to help.
That would be nice. I hope that's the case. But
I don't think it's for everybody, though. Not everybody gets that chance.
Right. And why was she so special? Well, she's the queen.
She's the queen.
The queen.
Tea and crumpets, please.
Since she was the queen, the story could have been embellished a little bit. Maybe she didn't quite see herself, and maybe she just had a feeling. And there can be this prodromal phase and seizure activity where you kind of sense and feel. But what's more likely medically is she was becoming sick, and in her delirium and in a fever, she can have this hallucination because of the area of the brain that's affected, especially if she was spiking a temperature pretty high at that point, giving her a near-death or like feeling, or seeing your own body laying dead is the classic deathbed apparition that they might embellish as far as her story goes. But having a vision can be explained. So there's different parts of your brain that's responsible for your senses. The occipital lobe in your brain gives you visual hallucinations, but it's the temporal lobe that is responsible for more complex visual hallucinations, like seeing people, scenes, or objects. It almost appears like a movie or a dreamlike state, and it can appear in color. So if she had a really high fever, it could have been affecting this temporal lobe portion of her brain.
Well, and in your medical opinion, because I did look up on her death and how she died, she was actually 69 years old. So she'd already reigned as queen for 45 years. But people thought that maybe she died of blood poisoning. So with that, wouldn't she have a fever if that was the case
that's sepsis,
medically?
for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
That blood poisoning is a systemic infection, so something had spread throughout your body, and the infection was in your blood. So she could have had a fever, and if the fever was high enough, that can cause seizures.
Hallucinations, too, I know, with the high fever,
Yes. So that's likely what happened with her, rather than an actual doppelganger visit.
I agree with you on this one. And I know that the body, as the body is preparing for death, there's things and processes that happen. And I know we've talked about that before
The
in our
death imagery.
episode. Who knows? Maybe her body did know. Maybe she got a premonition of what was coming just to prepare her one way or the other.
And that's why these stories are fascinating, especially since we have the historical documentation of her death and the suspected blood poisoning, which is not something they understood very well back then. So seeing herself on her deathbed would be fascinating to them. They openly believed that kind of stuff, and that would end up being in court records. But the blood poisoning piece is interesting.
Yeah, because back then, how they would get rid of bad blood was to put the leeches on
Oh,
it.
yeah.
They'd done that for forever,
right?
Until they learned eventually, like,
That's how George Washington died. But
and I'm really surprised with Queen Elizabeth because things were very religious back then. But maybe hers mattered because she was a queen. I don't know.
Yeah, they're not going to go against the queen.
Right.
Okay, so another female authority figure, not quite a queen this time. We're talking about Empress. And I'm going to introduce her because this is Catherine the Great, which we share names, although she is not my doppelganger. She is Russian, and this is from 1796 timeframe. So legend says her own guards, more than one, witnessed her walking through the palace when she was in another location. Another version of the story says that the guards claimed to see her sitting on her throne while she was sleeping. So what happened is when she woke up, the guards told her what they had witnessed. Clearly, they must have been a little confused.
Mm-hmm.
Here you are, you're sleeping. We just saw you over on your throne. So she, in an alarmed state, ordered that this apparition be confronted. And I think the story says that she ordered them to shoot it.
Yeah.
Then reports say that these bullets went right through her. She was still there on her throne and it didn't affect anything. They saw that it was transparent.
That's what you call a Wonder Woman.
Yeah. So reports claim that she also collapsed shortly afterward, dying from a stroke weeks later. And she was about 67 years old. So given her age, that you're at higher risk for strokes as you age. So again, a stroke, what that is, a clot or a bleed in your brain that deprives a portion of your brain of oxygen. Many people can experience seizure-like activity. Of course, we don't have an MRI scan of her brain or a autopsy, but perhaps it would have revealed that there could have been damage to the temporal lobe. However, the interesting thing about this case is it wasn't just witnessed by her, it was witnessed by her guards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why this falls into legend. This is an old story, so the story could have changed over time, but group psychoses is extremely rare. Could one guard have said that they saw something and then everybody else tend to believe it? Or maybe the story was twisted over the years and it wasn't actually witnessed by more than one person?
Yeah, like mass hysteria.
Mass hysteria
Mm-hmm.
is one explanation, especially from something that historic and that long ago. I don't know. Historically, seeing one's doppelganger has been considered a death omen. So what do you think this could have been, Christy, from a metaphysical perspective?
Well, I definitely believe it could be a death omen for sure. And what exactly is a death omen? Well, according to when you look this up, it's supposedly something like an indicator that a person who is visited by their doppelganger, or whatever you want to call it, it's basically letting them know, hey, you're going to die.
So,
Like, here's what you have coming up. You're basically dead.
so it's a spiritual omen.
Yeah. And in some ways, you can look at it like the premonition of what's to come. But
Or projection.
yes. But when you look at it from the doppelganger viewpoint, are they being warned? Is this their angels, their spirits, their guides telling them, hey, this is what's going to happen? This is your death omen. Your death is coming? Possibly.
So very similar to Queen Elizabeth in trying to communicate to the person to prepare.
Yeah.
But according to the story, it was the guard that saw it first. She was sleeping. So
Yeah. So Catherine
Was
didn't
this-
even experience, like she didn't see it. So it couldn't have been
no,
her
she
doppelganger.
saw, well, I guess this is where the story changes over time and how it's told and retold has it been twisted. Because from
Good.
what I understood, she saw it as well and ordered the guards to shoot at it. Or she just heard the story and told them to, well, you better go shoot at it.
Yeah, go find it and go shoot it.
She thought maybe it was somebody impersonating her trying to take over the throne.
Right. Which that
Who
did
knows what
happen.
her thoughts were?
Yeah.
Who knows what the real story was? But it's still a really cool legend.
Mm-hmm. And I do believe things like death omens and stuff occur. And again, it could go along the lines as well as premonition of what's going to come.
We do know she was older, and we do know she was ill at the time. It's documented that she died of a stroke.
Mm-hmm.
There also, given the time frame, could have been some dim lighting. The guards could have been fatigued. They could have been on post for a long period of time. And maybe they had a little bit of pareidolia, and these shadows created what looked like something sitting on the throne. Or maybe there was a depression in the fabric of the cushioning, and they thought a person was there and overreacted. And that led to this dramatic scene, the shootout.
Or some of that is part of it, I think, is like a stretch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to explain
Story embellishment over the years.
Exactly. That's like the telephone game over time. Okay. So we have another one here. It's Percy. I'm going to butcher this name. I already know. Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Yep.
Did I say it right?
Yep.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Percy, Bysshe, Shelley.
Okay, that's almost like Sally sells seashores
Seashell?
by the sea or
And there's
seashells by
Shelley.
the seashore.
Shelley in here. So
Anyway, this guy was back from 1822. He was an English writer in his time. He was one of the more famous English Romantic poets from Sussex, England. And he repeatedly saw a doppelganger, right? But it was like a silent double of himself. And this was before his death. It's reported that this figure, when he would see it, would be very pale, expressionless, and it seemed to block his path. So I don't know if it like walked in front of him and was like, no, you ain't going any further or what. I don't know. But he was married. He had a wife. Her name was Mary Shelley. And she fully believed that this was a death omen, letting him know, hey, you're going to die. So this is another case of a premonition. Within weeks of him seeing this repeatedly, he drowned in a storm, which that's
Wow.
sad.
that's pretty traumatic.
Yeah. But what I don't get with this is why would this figure stand in front of him and block his path? What would be the meaning of that?
Yeah, because again, we're assuming there's purpose behind it.
Mhm.
Again, maybe it's just to prepare yourself. But we
Maybe.
do know that he did suffer from illness, insomnia, emotional instability, and he likely used laudanum, which is like an opium
Oh,
derivative.
so he was high.
It could have been. If he had chronic illness and maybe he had chronic pain and insomnia, all of these things can mess with your brain and what's going on and how you're experiencing things. So it doesn't say that his wife witnessed this. He probably told her about it and she
Mhm.
believes him. Seeing is believing in this time. And
Oh, yeah, because they didn't lie back then.
right. And this tragic death, drowning in a storm, he could have been either having effects from this medication or perhaps sleep deprived. Accidents can happen and perhaps he
Mhm.
drowned. I mean, that can explain the visions before death if he was in a declining state neurologically.
Yeah.
So I feel this has a strong association with what we call autoscopic hallucinations, where the brain is projecting a copy of itself. If that portion of the brain that connects to memory and images in that temporal lobe is having an effect due to this illness or this medication.
So to me, from a metaphysical point, nah, probably not on this.
Well, if you're seeing a copy of yourself, that is the definition of the doppelganger.
Right.
But is what you have said about metaphysical theory that spirit is going to look like them because it's going to grab their attention,
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, there's something going on with you. I'm going to project myself as you so you can make note.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it grabs their attention. Well, that's weird, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So who do we have up next? I'm not even going to try to introduce this individual because this person is French. And you
Oh.
know how I am.
Guy de Maupassant?
Oh my gosh, you said
Je
that
parle
so
un peu de français.
beautifully. How do you do that?
My entire family on my mom's side is French Canadian. I grew up with French. I took years of French in school. I do not speak French well because it's been 20-something years since I was in school learning it.
Yeah.
So this guy was an author, wrote extensively about seeing his own doppelgangers. This isn't stories. He actually wrote about it, claimed that this doppelganger would enter his room, sit across from him, and tell stories word for word, what he later published.
I'm sorry, I'm having red flags here.
Right.
Now, I have heard spiritually of spirits coming through and actually, like if they were a writer in the past, they can use a person living to publish their story
Oh.
or to help them guide in writing. I have
Okay.
heard of that. So maybe this is what he was experiencing.
Perhaps.
But I find it just far-fetched that he's automatically going to see his doppelganger just, oh, hey, bud, here, get a pen and paper out. Let's dictate some stories together. Let's
Well,
have some coffee or whatever the French eat.
whether the metaphysical belief on this is true or not, we also know,
Who-
again, sensing a trend here, that this guy was also sick. He suffered from neurosyphilis.
What in the world is that?
That is infection.
sounds like
That's
something bad.
syphilis in the brain. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
clearly having some damage here, causing vivid hallucinations, paranoia, disassociation.
When I hear the syphilis thing, I'm thinking of STD.
So, yeah. but spread to the brain. That's exactly what it is.
Oh, gosh, that's horrible.
Yes. So this autoscopic hallucination is where a person perceives a visual double of themselves. So we're seeing this again and again. And that's that repetition that we look for in science. When we have this condition and we know that this illness can affect the brain, we can recreate this, we see it happen again. So then that temporal parietal lobes again are malfunctioning, producing this feeling of another you in the room.
Mm-hmm. And along this topic, that makes me think, I think we should cover automatic writing. I think that would be an interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be a very interesting topic. But this guy here reminds me of that. And I'm going to say on his case, I'm thinking it's more medical.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you on
Yeah.
this. I think I think the syphilis was just eating away at his brain.
Well, here's another case. This one's another French case.
Oh, yeah.
What's
no,
up with French?
You introduce. I'm not even going to try. I'll butcher it.
This is Emily Sagée.
Shazai? That
No,
sounds.
not Chazé. Sagée.
Sagée.
This is actually
There you
one
go.
of the most famous doppelganger cases concerning a French school teacher at a girls' boarding school in Latvia.
This is interesting.
Latvia is Eastern European, but this is 1845. The story is that students repeatedly saw her double. So this is more than one person again, right? Students, plural, according to the story. That sometimes this double would mimic her movement. So they're seeing her and this double together.
Are we sure this is not just another student up there, like trying to make fun of the teacher?
I don't know. In one chilling account, Sagée was writing on the blackboard while her double stood beside her, copying every motion, yet holding no chalk. On another occasion, students watched the double sit in Sagée's chair while the real woman was outside in the garden. Very similar to our Catherine the Great story, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, see, okay, I have to say, this makes me wonder if this is not something more like a spirit imitating her. What the purpose would be, I don't know. But I don't know. To me, this is a little bit different, I think, than like the precognition ones
So,
from
What
before.
do you think, like a bilocation, like
Yeah,
you're
like an astral projection in a
right?
sense. Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe not her as astral projecting. Maybe this is another spirit.
So this could lean more to what you think a doppelganger is, in that
Yeah.
there's a spirit double of her trying to communicate something to her.
Yeah, and you could probably even throw in a little bit of time slip here too, depending upon, I don't know, something with this just stands out a little bit more to me. And I know with the astral bilocation is more so where the soul is supposed to temporarily split from the physical body, and that's what they see outside. But I don't know. This is interesting, and I know you can have mass hysteria,
Yeah.
but with children,
Yeah, of course. They're
I
very
mean,
influential, especially they all live together. This is boarding schools too, which could also point towards illness. If they're all living together, they could have all been ill with something. We don't really have that documented, but
I found
mean,
that all
any living
far-fetched.
situation where you have mass people, like dormitories and colleges, things like meningitis.
Yeah,
can
but to make
affect
them
people
all see
all
the
at
same
once.
thing at the same time, I don't know about that.
Exactly. Well, I know it is a stretch, obviously, but
It is.
that can happen, that they're all ill at the same time, or power of suggestion. And memory recall being rebuilding itself, and that power of suggestion. And who knows what was going on at that time, but big red flags there.
I don't know, something with this, it just doesn't sit right with me. Like, I feel like, I'm not saying that it's not true. I'm just saying
But if they
that,
were all afflicted with the same viral illness, this
Yeah.
mirror neuron misfiring, seeing double can be something that you experience in high fever. So they could have all have been looking at the teacher
like
and
a
they see
blurry
a double.
vision.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like the medical sense on this, I can see it.
Yeah, it becomes a story because of how rare it is. And if everybody saw it at once, then it gets documented as a story.
Well, of course.
Versus the individual, I saw double, I saw blurry vision. I could see it explained with certain illnesses if they all caught together. And one of the signs and symptoms of this particular illness is seeing double. They're all focused on the same thing, the teacher at the front of the room, and they're seeing double at the same time. That's what I think it was.
What I found was interesting, though, is when the students saw her, they would see sometimes that the spirit was mimicking her movements, but then other times it acted independent of her.
Right.
So there's something with that.
That could be the story being twisted over time
Well, of
and
course.
believed differently.
And see,
Again,
that's the thing.
recalling memory. Memory is not good at recalling. We rebuild our memories when we try to recall and try to focus in too hard. We're not remembering it exactly the way it was, so the story gets told differently.
And we don't
And
have
then we
all the
assume it was some independent motion versus double vision.
yeah, and we don't have all the independent variables when it comes
Yeah.
to the environment and
It's hard to know when the story isn't well documented because it's so historic.
mhm.
We don't know all the details. We weren't there to witness ourselves.
Well, and it's the French people too. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
I have nothing against the French. Let me just say, I just thought it was funny. I don't know.
No,
Some
we love
things
to
just
pick.
pop into my head. I don't have the explanation for it, but no, I see what you're saying. I'm saying,
Yeah.
I think in any of these cases, it can be far-fetched. And whereas I understand the overall definition of doppelgangers, I don't know. Maybe I just see things a little bit different, more on the metaphysical side, since that's been my experience. But
Right.
I
Well,
think this next case
Yes.
is very interesting.
This one's right up my alley. I love World War I and World War II history.
Mm-hmm.
So the trench doppelgangers of World War I.
1914 to 1918.
This one's
Okay.
really cool because the story is that soldiers reported seeing doubles of themselves or other comrades shortly before fatal missions. So some of these doubles even gestured towards safer passages, saving lives.
Now,
So,
I'm thinking some of this, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe this could be like a residual imprint in some ways if you think about it. But before we get real deep into this particular case, let me say that the word doppelganger, it's actually German, and they do consider it either a wraith or an apparition of a living person as distinguished from a ghost. Now, with that said, this whole topic can go back to folklore and myths, religious concepts and traditions of cultures throughout humans, but also doppelgangers in general have been perceived as like bad omens, like things that are to come that are not good. So if you think about this case with these soldiers, was this a warning that, hey, this is what you got coming and this is the results? Or this is what you got coming, so make the change before you see these results. See what I mean?
right. But from a scientific or a medical perspective,
course.
soldiers are sleep deprived. Lots of trauma is occurring, emotional trauma. It's dark. It's hard to see things. You got smoke everywhere. Pareidolia can occur in those cases. Pareidolia meaning your brain is trying to make sense of confusing images. And when your vision is distorted in the environment of war with explosions and smoke and
Mhm.
fire and all that stress your brain is under, you're trying to make sense of the images your eyes are seeing. Your brain's trying to interpret this. All of this is ideal conditions for a hallucination. Seeing yourself from the outside is known as a stress response in combat zones. So we've seen this even since World War I. The consistency across wars is striking, but so are the shared conditions. So similar wars that have happened since then, we have similar experiences.
And do you know how many ghosts have actually, like stories of ghosts have been associated with soldiers of war?
Sure.
Now-
Civil War, all kinds of.
Oh, yes.
Now, I feel like that if ghosts do exist, this separate from this type of situation. This is when it's not spirit presence, when this is totally psychological. The stress response, that survival instinct, it could be a gut instinct coming on at the same time of having some visual hallucination. So then you perceive that this image saved your life when you really were just tapping into what your gut was telling you is safer. Go down that path. Get out of here this way. Happening at the same time as a hallucination.
True with Hitler and his soldiers. Did you know he actually used drugs with them?
Yeah.
I can see that in the case, especially when drugs were involved in some
Right.
of these hallucinations and seeing.
Even without drug substances, your brain's going through chemical stress, cortisol response,
Mhm.
epinephrine, norepinephrine, fight or flight, confusion, sleep deprivation, portions of your brain shutting down. and also all the chaos visually, and your brain's trying to interpret what you're seeing in the middle of all this high stress situation. So this is one of those cases where I really do feel they thought what they saw was a doppelganger, and it's all in their head.
I feel like they could have had true spirit also coming to warn them. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I've heard too many war
And
stories.
maybe there were some cases where that was, but when they saw an image of themselves, specifically that doppelganger image,
Precognition. Hey, here's what's coming.
stress response, brain activity.
Possible.
Yeah.
Let's say we can agree 50-50 on this one. How's that?
Okay. Case by case situation.
I just thought that was very interesting on that one. I'm going to let you explain this next one because this is right up your alley with hospitals and...
So this is more modern times. Since 2000, doppelgangers have resurfaced as part of people's stories. We see doppelgangers on security cameras now with technology. We've got the Ring doorbell cameras and hospital footage in like security cameras. That's where emotions, I think, come in when it comes to hospitals and seeing people. The general public already thinks of hospitals as places of death where people die, which it happens.
They can be very haunted,
Right.
by the way.
So our brains are already thinking, oh, what are we seeing on an image? But because it's a hospital security camera, we're thinking ghost. But Zoom calls, even having doppelgangers, some people appear translucent or arriving before the person actually does. So
that's all hooey, if you ask me.
But some could be led to believe this is energy imprinting.
Yeah, it's not. It's a bunch of crap.
Because we know technology can be flawed. And it's fun and cool and creepy when it does happen, but it can be explained by compression, digital compression, time stamping in our software that's not synced up very well, cached frames. So that's like the old recording over a cassette tape and you get that underlying layer that kind of bleeds through. Well, you can do that digitally with cached frames. Motion overlap. That can occur. I've never experienced that on Zoom, but that would be pretty creepy. And with all of the people that are using that technology, especially during COVID time in 2020, there were more of these stories coming through, and that's just with increased use.
Yeah, and you're seeing videos that have been redone with AI, like seeing animals talk. And, and
you can't trust anything you see now.
Yeah, but anything is possible in the digital age, and I tend to, when it comes to stuff like that, shy away from that, of course. Now, if I'm the one capturing it, I know that it happened, then I know it's true.
I'm going to bring psychology right in there because that fear response is real. And when somebody's observing something, maybe with technology that's a little bit flawed and not working the way that we're used to it working, that fear, knowing all the lore and legend behind Doppelganger, especially with it being a negative omen of what's to come, that fear can play on that mental processing of what you're witnessing and distort it even further. So that could be what's happening here.
You could take fear and you could expand that on anything, especially when it comes to paranormal stuff. And we've seen throughout the years that people can take and run with that and make things a lot worse than what they are.
Right. And now you see my skeptic perspective on most things.
Yes. And I do understand that. And I think you have a healthy understanding too, just from the metaphysical point of view, though, why I'm a firm believer in a lot of things metaphysical.
To give the metaphysical side a little bit of openness, I would think that, maybe perhaps that's possible, spirit connection and communication. I think it's less likely just because we already know and we can see in repetition, especially with illness and temporal lobe disturbances and hallucinations, stress, illness, stress response, fatigue. We can see that repeat, and we can actually make that happen if we manipulate the brain in surgery. So we know that's a real thing. That is more likely, and the easier explanation is likely the truth. That is not to say that the paranormal doesn't happen. I just think it's extremely rare, and that's why we don't see it happen all of the time.
Well, of course. But the fact that it does happen means that it is out there and that, yes, it is a legit thing, regardless of what anybody believes. But I'm enjoying the Cryptid Files. I think this was a very interesting one.
Yeah,
But
it's
again,
a topic to start off with.
oh yeah.
I love how it goes right into neuropsychology and the brain. It's just so fascinating and showing how fragile the human mind really is.
Well, on your end, yes.
Yeah.
And then looking at it from a spiritual point of view, I do believe that there are different people have different versions of doppelganger. Of course, you have the classic definition, but from a metaphysical point of view, I do believe that true doppelgangers are spirit related in a sense, as far as not every case, but I'm just saying, and that there is more meaning behind them in the long run. But we should keep doing more of these cryptic files. And
Right.
if there's a certain, I mean, Bigfoot's coming and some different topics. But if there is a certain one, I think we've had a request for the Wraith. But if there's a certain one that you guys are interested in hearing, let us know. And we'll give you the metaphysical and the scientific.
If you've experienced your own doppelganger, please write in to us and tell us your story. We would
Oh, yeah.
love to feature some listener tales and your experiences and break it down and analyze it. So you can share your own parastories, topic suggestions, and comments at psychic and skeptic all spelled out at gmail.com. And you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. And thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.